Hey, what's up everybody? Hope you're having an amazing day so far. I'm your host Phil. Welcome to today's video. Yeah, in this video, we're going to talk about me being an absolute idiot. I made a mistake which is going to cost me quite some money. And yeah, I'm going to show you what mistake I made, what it's all about, and how I'm going to remedy that mistake. So let's roll that intro clip, get into some talking. If you are a regular on the channel, then first off, huge thank you. I absolutely appreciate you tuning in regularly. But you also know that I recently released a video on quantum speakers, which are basically NAM-based speaker profiles created by the company Neutron Audio. I was really blown away by the feel of playing through these quantum speaker profiles. I really liked the sound and I really liked the options. So all in all, I was really impressed, especially given the price bracket which you're asking for, which is somewhere around 20 to 30 pounds. There were, however, a lot of people which were rightfully so skeptical if a quantum speaker actually brings any benefit to impulse responses or compared to impulse responses. Now, in that video, I already talked about why non-linearities of the quantum speaker, which have been captured, might be inherently beneficial towards the, let's say, linear static approach impulse response is taken. However, I kind of wanted to step that up and I wanted to make an own speaker profile over here with the things which I have over here. So I just wanted to kind of make impulse responses on different levels, make a speaker profile of the entire speaker, and then give an A/B comparison. And while, conducting those tests and preparing everything, I made a huge mistake. Now, the mistake which I made was basically not accounting for the compatibility of the hardware equipment which I was using in order to conduct the test, in order to prepare everything. So just that you get a small understanding of what's going on. When you do NAM profiles, you have to send the NAM test signal through some sort of chain which you want to capture. That can be, for example, your amplifier, that can be your overdrive, or in that case, that would be my speaker. However, the speaker signal, or the signal going through the speaker, has to be amplified somehow. So you could use different things, you could go through the power amp of your tube amplifier, you could go, maybe through a solid state power amp, which you have like a pedal board friendly power amp. Yeah, but me, idiot, I decided to take a different approach because everything was kind of already cabled and finished to go with. I took the power amp of the Kemper Profiler. So while there's nothing inherently wrong with using the power amp section of the Kemper Profiler power head, you have to be reminded, or you have to be in the know, that this power amp section can deliver up to 600 watts RMS on 8 ohms. And the cabinet which I have chosen is my trusty 2x12 Harley Benton V30 vertical cabinet, which has two V30s in them, which have a power rating of each speaker being 60 watts. So that means that this cabinet in total is capable of handling 120 watts. Now, 600 watts, 120 watts. Who would have thought this might pose a problem? However, normally when you run any kind of power amplifier in a low level setup, so a low volume setup, you are absolutely fine with using a cabinet which has a lesser rating than that. However, I wanted to kind of push the cabinet to its maximum intentionally because my thought was that I wanted to make the speaker profile kind of looking at the entire dynamic range of the speaker. Now that was a huge mistake because I did not account for how powerful this power head is over here, and I don't have like a hard threshold where you can really hear, oh, now it's breaking, now it's not breaking, so you don't have that. So the only thing which I had was that all of a sudden things started smelling a little bit burnt, and I was like really frightened that something might catch fire or something. Thankfully, I have to say, the Kemper is absolutely fine. Nothing's wrong with the Kemper, but everything is wrong with the Harley Benton 2x12 since then. The huge issue is that I need this cabinet ready to go next weekend. We're gonna play with my band Tempest in Cologne, and we are, responsible for the guitar speakers in the back line, and I want to take my two 2x12 verticals with me, so I gotta get the speaker going on. So my initial thought was like, oh my god, where am I gonna get those cabinets ahead? But then I remembered to myself, hey, wait a minute, you know somebody who had like 50 vintage 30s of different types, who made some awesome tests on this, and why don't you go ahead and ask him? That's exactly what I did. I reached out to the other John Browne. You might know him from YouTube for his crazy speaker experiment where he conducted tests across like 50 different Celestion Vintage 30s and Marshall G12s and what else not. And I asked to him like, hey, you got so many speakers, do you happen to have like 2 really good sounding vintage 30 speakers which I can utilize and put in my cab, buy them off of you? And gladly so, he had some. And he super quickly delivered on that one. So, John, thank you so much. So in this video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna first listen to how the broken cabinet sounds compared to a still functioning cabinet. Afterwards, we're gonna unpack all of that stuff. We're gonna build in the 2 speakers, which I got over here from John Browne. We're gonna build them into that cabinet, and then we're gonna again do the A/B comparison test over here, because what I got over here are not vintage 30s. These are G12 Vintage from Marshall. Now, the other John Browne in this video already showed us that it doesn't make that much of a difference if they are Marshall OEMs or not. However, these are specifically smooth sounding according to John. If anybody, I trust his judgment on this. I'm super excited for this experiment. I want to try out what is going on in that regard, and I'm super happy to take you just along on the way, you know, just to make you learn out of my stupid mistakes. I'm just gonna let the camera roll, and then we're gonna have a time lapse. Let's get this rocking. All right, so now I got the test setup going on. Let me turn around the camera and then explain what we got over here. So we got basically both cabinets in a row. This one over here, the first one, is the one with the broken speakers. This over here is the one fully functioning. I got my setup going on with the dime head NAM player, which is capturing my EVH, or which has a profile loaded in with my EVH boosted by the Lichtlam Audio King in Yellow. That is going through the equalizer just to give it a little bit of a volume bump over here, and then goes into the Harley Benton GPA 100, and that in turn goes into either one of these cabinets. So they're not being turned on in parallel, they're being basically turned on one after another. I'm gonna have a ReAmp file running through them specifically so that we get comparable audio files, which we can then really listen to. And yeah, we're gonna strictly A/B them. As you can see, the microphone will be set always that it's kind of, like moving flush with this over here, with this plane field. And it's gonna be center exactly on the cap, because this is not about sound. This is just to kind of get always, as much as possible, a same listening position. So I think this suits this very well. I'm gonna do some recordings, and then we're gonna listen to what this sounds like. I now got a setup going on where I can basically flick between the 2 cabinets by just pressing this button over here. Unfortunately, I do not have twice the same microphone in order to capture all of that and sending that to you and making an A/B comparison. That's what I did the recordings for. You just have to kind of trust my judgment over here when flicking through them, because you're listening everything through that particular microphone, which you're seeing over there. And this one being closer to the microphone will definitely skew what you are listening to. So I'm just gonna play it through. So right now, I'm currently playing on the working cabinet, so the fully functioning cabinet sounds like this. I'm now switching. And the main thing is that the non-working cabinet has a lot less low end than the actual working cabinet. So the working cabinet is way fuller. I mean, by all accounts, this is not actually a totally bad sound, to be honest. I could imagine that this is usable for quite some different things, but in that regard, you know, I'm not vibing with this type of sound. So that's where I'm really interested how these will kind of fit into the build. So the next step is to get all of this away and really get into actually building in these speakers and then repeating the entire test. All right, so what we got over here is the two speakers over here, which we have to take out and replace through these over here. These are each bolted onto, front loaded with 4 screws. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place the cabinet on its back, and I'm gonna use this super handy tool, which is my best friend for this endeavor. And I'm gonna take out the cabinets over here, put in the new ones in. Gonna be pretty cool. I'm gonna try to film everything from a different angle, not using that camera, so that you are a little bit closer up. All right, I got the front camera of my smartphone going on over here. I'm gonna make sure that we get a little bit more light from the outside so that you can see a little bit better what's going on over here. Yeah, so basically we gotta replace these 2 speakers and then take them out of here, which I'm gonna place over here so you can see them better. Yeah, let's see how that goes. Should be not taking too long. So there we go. Set this correctly and out they go. So the thing is, with all of these different things is, don't be afraid to do your stuff. You know, like in the end, you know, you got to empower yourself and just take the courage up to do these kind of things on your own equipment. You cannot break that much things if you're not acting like me, like a stupid idiot. So got all those 8 screws out now. Make sure that you have some box or something where you can place the screws. So, like so, that you're not losing anything. I already heard that something where the screw is basically going into, I am lacking now the English word for that, basically fell down into the cabinet, so I got to get that out later. But now it's basically lifting up the cabinet slowly with your fingers and seeing what we got over here. So yeah, there we go. This is the rivet or whatever you want to call it. I gotta place that back in here. Hang on. Okay, there we go. Okay, now let me grab the smartphone and show you what we got over there. All right, so now we got the speaker terminals over here. They are not soldered on, and I will now make photos of these so that I know exactly where what is connected, and then I'm gonna try to see if I can actually see any visual damage on the coils or on anything related to the speaker. So gonna take these bad boys out, gonna inspect them and make photos of the wiring. So upon visual inspection, there was nothing which I actually could see on those speakers which is broken or why they are broken, so there's nothing for me to kind of repair in that sense. So I'm just gonna go ahead with, you know, the try and error approach. Gonna take these out of the boxing and then I'm just gonna place them into the speaker and we're gonna do the A/B comparisons. Okay, so this bad boy over here, first one over here, Marshall G12 Vintage. I mean, they're supposedly the same thing like the other vintage 30s, but I just love G12 vintages. They're dear to my heart because my favorite cab, the Marshall 1960, has them built in as well, and I love this cab so much. Really curious to hear how they will make their work in this cabinet over here. So, let's move on. And we got bad boy number 2 over here. Yeah, really cool. Really excited. Okay, I'm now gonna make sure that I'm gonna cable them in there. Gonna do either a time lapse or a jump in the video, and then we're gonna compare the sound samples which we're getting. All right, everything built in. We are done with replacing the speakers over here. Super important when you do any kind of changes on your speaker is to measure the DC resistance of your speaker. It should be somewhere around the value which you have as an impedance. So that means when you got an 8 ohm impedance, that means that you should be somewhere around the ballpark of 7 ohms. In my case, I'm at 6.3, which is absolutely fine and within the realm well expected. Having this value is absolutely what I expect, so that's fine. Now this is super interesting. Now I replaced the speakers over here, everything said and done. I got this A/B comparison set up where I can just click on this over here to switch between the cabinets. I'm just gonna play a little bit. So this was the formerly working one. I'm just gonna call this Celestion, and I'm gonna call this one Marshall because the working one had the Celestion V30s and the other one had the Marshall G12 Vintage. So the Celestion box now, this is the one. I'll switch. Now that's really weird. Now the G12 Vintage definitely are way smoother. So what John Browne said is exactly the case. These are super smooth in the top end. Eventually a little bit too smooth for my taste for just playing like in the room at a lower volume. I mean, this is quite loud, you know, this is not bedroom volume. This is a little bit above. Yeah, but they are definitely way more smoothed out in that 5 to 6 kilohertz region. However, I think when I will crank these up to the volume which I did the recordings earlier, I think this is going to absolutely slay. I think the Marshall G12 are going to be really visceral. They're going to be really impactful. The low end is like back there and it's even stronger than with the Vintage 30s. This is super interesting because this is not a scientific test that this means that G12 Vintage will always sound the same. As John Browne pointed out, this just means that these particular speakers are sounding in that way. So maybe a mix and match would be like super interesting at some point in time. But this is not for today's video. In today's video, I basically want to kind of just document, vlog the repair approach and, you know, thing going on. So what I'm going to do, just going to play a little bit around, A, B, back and forth between them. Then I'm going to make the recordings. All right, so those were some amazingly differently sounding tones. Now, when comparing all of the three against each other, what we mainly can say is the broken vintage 30s and the working vintage 30s, they pretty much have the same DNA, but you can clearly hear that the broken vintage 30s lack the low end, they lack the dynamics. There seems to be something wrong with them simply in comparison to the working vintage 30s, but they are the same speaker. Now, when it comes to the Marshall G12 Vintage and comparing that to the vintage 30s, which are working, I'm not so sure actually. And things which I'm reading are conflicting all over, all over the internet. Now, I know John Browne made this incredible video where some of the regular vintage 30s sounded, to my ears, better than some of the Marshall G12 vintages which he had. But he also pointed out in that particular video that the Marshall Vintage 12 both had speaker repairs done to them. So maybe there's some factor in that which is still kind of, unresolved due to the lack of, the sample size which John had. And also the official statements from Marshall are that the G12 Vintage are specifically made to their directions and they are voiced differently. So there's a lot of conflicting material out there. I'm undecided on which, pathway I want to kind of believe into, but I can say that these G12 vintages sound absolutely phenomenal. So I'm super thankful for John that he was able to send them out. Again, buddy, thank you so much. My personal learnings out of this. One of the major learnings is pay people to do their stuff which they know of, which they are experts in. Because all of this started basically because I wanted to make my own speaker profiles just to prove a point in an online debate going on. Instead of, just simply relying on the people at Neutron Audio, knowing their stuff, knowing what's going on, having everything thought out. I mean, it's already there for us all to enjoy, so why can't we enjoy that? And secondly, and this might be the even more important lesson which I'm getting out of this, don't get too fed up in online discussions. It's not worth it. Like this entire thing could have been avoided if I wouldn't have been caught up in this online debate around quantum speaker versus impulse responses versus quantum speaker. Which is better? Which is more dynamic? Which sounds better? Just let your freaking ears decide. And that's exactly what I actually propagated in the quantum speaker video, that you're just supposed to listen to things. If you like it, then stay with it. If you don't like it, move on. So, that's a huge learning for me personally. I'm going to try to put myself out of the negativity which sometimes comes in those debates, even though it is important to seek out the truth. And because of that, the follow-up video to this might eventually be that I'm actually doing my own speaker profiles, but just for, curiosity reasons, not to settle a debate or something, but just for my own curiosity, because that is something which always served me the best. If I'm doing things in my own interest and if I'm doing things because I'm passionate about them, then the results turn out to be great. With that out of the way, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something out of this. And if you like what you're seeing, I highly appreciate everybody subscribing to the channel, liking the video, commenting. What are your experiences with this online debate? Let's not get into that actual online debate, please, over here. Let's just focus, on positive things. Do you actually like the broken vintage 30? Because some people which I sent these files to were like, hey, the vintage 30 which is broken actually sounds pretty good, to my ears. So I would be super curious about your personal preference in that regard. And have you ever changed speakers? What are your favorite speaker mix and matches? That's something I also want to dive into during the next months. So yeah, with that out of the way, thank you again everybody for watching this video. Hope you're gonna have an amazing day so far, and until next video, gonna see you there. Keep it metal.